today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
Modern Treasury is a payment operations platform. So we really help companies manage their business across, payments, accounting, approvals, things like that. And if you think about in the world of fintech, we're very much on the tech side. We're selling software that companies use to manage their businesses.
Welcome to the Tearsheet Podcast. I'm Tearsheet Editor-in-Chief, Zack Miller. As a fintech entrepreneur, I co-founded OurCrowd, one of the largest equity crowdfunding platforms in the world. Our back office was always hard to get our hands around. Money in and money out, and the timing of money in motion took a lot of time and effort to manage effectively. Payment flows and tools to integrate have come a long way since we started that business in 2012. Dimiti Dadiomov is co-founder and CEO of Modern Treasury. His firm is a payment operations platform and works with firms to build and manage their money movement without taking hold of the payments. It's the tech in fintech. Dimitri joins us on the podcast to talk about his firm's genesis story and the market for payment operations. His firm's APIs provide workable connections to banks to help with tracking money movement and reconciliation. Dimiti Dadiomov, my guest today on the Tearsheet Podcast.
My name is Dimitri Dadiomov. I'm co-founder and CEO of Modern Treasury. It's a company we started a couple of years ago in San Francisco. And my background is mostly in product.
So let's talk about Modern Treasury. Like what? First of all, succinctly, what does it do? We'll get into the deeper, I think, in a second. And then I'd like to hear where the idea came from.
Modern Treasury is a payment operations platform. So we really help companies manage their business across, payments, accounting, approvals, things like that. And if you think about in the world of fintech, we're very much on the tech side. We're selling software that companies use to manage their businesses.
And where did the idea come from? Where did it germinate for you?
So my two co-founders and I worked together at Lending Home, which is an online mortgage company. And in the course of building that company up to become now the number one fix and flip lender in the US, we had a lot of problems with bank integrations, with accounting, with managing all that in a way that is easy. And that interface between companies and banks around ACH wire and paper check was something that seemed pretty generic and pretty painful for us to build up to. And so around 2017, 18, we started spending a lot of time trying to figure out how other companies had done that and realized there really hasn't been an independent software product to help companies manage that. A lot of companies had built things internally, but there wasn't kind of a default easy solution to pick up and run with. And that was really the genesis of the idea.
Amazing. I was going to say, I think you're probably competing most closely against homegrown solutions that are workarounds for the most part.
That's absolutely right. There's companies where companies that are very techy tend to invest a lot of engineering resources against it, and we're competing against the payments team or a money team having to build some of these things internally. And then there's on the other end of the spectrum companies that are much more ops heavy. And they decidedly had not invested in the engineering around it, and then it becomes really quite a complicated process where people are managing G sheets from last Tuesday and looking things up, and that sort of chaos is very much what we hope to help alleviate and streamline and make a lot easier.
Amazing. Now, this is something I've seen up close with some of the companies I've helped start or worked for as a co-founder of OurCrowd, which is an equity crowdfunding platform, which has raised to date over $1 billion. But we did that in individual SPVs. So we created a separate company for each one of our funding rounds. Money came in at different times. There was a formal closing, but it came in different currencies from all around the world. There were follow-on rounds that sometimes went into the same SPV, sometimes went into the same SPV and another SPV, or sometimes went into a third-party SPV totally. There were distributions, obviously, if there was an exit or something like that. We spent a lot of time focused on building internal solutions, which included people and software to help us manage that. So is that the type of scenario that Modern Treasury is designed for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad you bring this up, because what you're describing is a classic payment ops problem that we love to help solve. Crowdfunding is a perfect example of that. So let me just walk you through the lifetime of a payment. So let's say you're doing a distribution and you're sending money to investors. We kind of break it down into 4 steps, and there's really somebody has to initiate a payment that can be done manually. It can be done through an API from your dashboard or from your product. But once the engineering team, if you will, has built to that API, there's a finance or a controller, finance team that's trying to really manage what is happening. So there's an approval step, and we really help build kind of that magic view for the controller to create a flow of queue of payments that need to be approved. Once something has been initiated and approved and sent to the bank and it shows up on the statement, you really need to reconcile that and update your dashboard and tell your investors that the money has been sent, or the company that the distribution has been done. And then finally, there's kind of a month close accounting challenge, which is somebody, oftentimes a separate person who has really not been a part of any of these operational flows, looks at this a month later and tries to make sense of it and categorize things. And so that flow of, initiate, approve, reconcile, and account is what we are really focused on connecting. And in the ideal scenario, you can really do it all sort of at once, or you can do it all in a way that's much, much more automated. And we see that in companies that are equity crowdfunding are certainly an aspect of this, but this is true in payroll and lending and B2B payments of all sorts. So this is a very common problem.
So I'd like to hear some more use cases, but before we do, who obviously the finance team is typically probably the end user, but who do you guys interface with mostly? Who are you selling to?
We think of our customers as being both on the CTO and on the CFO side of the house. Mm-hmm. So depending on the size of the company and the stage of the product and who's actually focused on it, the real buyer might be the CTO, or it might be the CFO. Mm-hmm. We very much believe that good fences make good neighbors. And so in a way, the ideal setup of the world is one where the CFO can trust the CTO to build freely, because they have the controls and they have the ability to manage what is actually happening in the bank accounts, and vice versa. The CTO can trust the CFO to be able to account for things cleanly and so on. So it's kind of a generalization, but I think it's generally true that the earlier stage companies, think of the Series A company, probably does not have a CFO. Right. Really, it's much more of a technical buyer that lands in our API docs and contacts us, and maybe not even have a bank account that's all set up and ready to go. And on the later stage companies, certainly the finance team is much more built out. They're oftentimes the driver. They have their own various strategic reasons for what banks they want to work with, et cetera. So it's a generalization, but I would say that the tech team is certainly the buyer in the early stage companies, and the finance team is more in the driver's seat in the bigger companies.
And as you see more nuanced fintech companies, like is the demand for this type of payment support technology, or how did you describe it initially?
Payment ops.
Yeah. Do you see that growing?
Absolutely. I think one of the things, if you take a step back, I think one of the things that is really exciting about where we are in the world of fintech, and maybe perhaps one of the drivers behind why there's so much excitement about fintech these days, is that if you think about commerce on the internet over the past 15, 20 years, it has by and large been around things that you pay for with credit card. It's been retail, e-commerce, subscriptions, things like that, travel. Now we're seeing a lot more companies, and I'm sure that you've spoken to a number of founders who are working in areas like insurance and real estate and healthcare and education. And those are all things that you actually don't pay for with a credit card. Those are things that you pay for with an ACH wire or paper check, at least in the US. And any company that is in those spaces, very quickly, as soon as it reaches a number of payments per day that starts being painful, starts looking for a solution like this, because they need to integrate to their bank and they need to make sure that things are being done in a well-controlled way. And a lot of the companies and solutions that have been built around commerce on the internet by credit card really aren't really right for them. When you think about OurCrowd managing international wires, I mean, that's a totally different problem than something like a travel website. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big part of it. So we're seeing companies from certainly fintech, that what you'd call as classic fintech, like a lending or investment platform type companies, but we're seeing lots of healthcare and real estate and other companies like that are using our product.
Do you actually touch money flows?
We do not. So we're not in the flow funds. We're very much a software product.
Is there intention to over time?
No, we have no ambition for it. I think there's a lot of companies that are really a lot of startups that are really focused on becoming a neobank or becoming a third party platform. Our belief is that ultimately the best way and the fastest way to do things is directly through your bank, and we want to enable every
Mhm.
company to connect most easily with a bank that they choose to work with, and for larger companies, maybe multiple banks.
Mhm.
So we very much have a tech view into it. We try not to focus too much on the um, finance side, if you will, from a business model perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. So can we talk about some of those use cases? So we kind of touched on lightly equity crowdfunding. Um,
Absolutely.
and I love that your experience came out of a problem that you experienced, directly in the mortgage industry. Um, what other use cases are you seeing there, or if you can kind of create some buckets?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of our earliest customers came from the healthcare insurance industry, a company called Sana Benefits, based in Austin, Texas, and they're one of the most innovative healthcare providers in the U.S. And when you think about the problem that they're solving, they're receiving funds from their clients, from small businesses and so on, and they have to separate that cash across different accounts, for reserve accounts. They have to send that money to providers when somebody has gone to a doctor or to a dentist or to a optometrist or what have you. And so managing, you end up with a pretty complicated spaghetti diagram of both book transfers that are internal and external payments. And they're using our product for that. They build their own business logic in terms of what should be sent where, but we actually do all the mechanical pieces there. Another example is Side Real Estate, which is a real estate brokerage company. One of the really exciting things about Side is when you think about a title and escrow kind of process when a house sells, the real estate agents might be receiving, 1%, 2%, 3% of that sale. And that typically is done very manually by wire. One of the
Mm.
things that's really exciting about some of the things that Side's been doing is really using real-time payments. So real-time payments, or RTP, is a new payment type in the US that is really meant to, in some ways, replace ACH and take care of some of these 3-day holds and not live on weekends and things like that I think are operational problems. So Side will send real-time payments to real estate agents and the like, and we help them kind of manage all that. And of course, when you move to a world from a world of very batch-based to real-time, it actually creates a lot of other operational problems that you need kind of software to address. And so one of the things that is, just to maybe come back to the point that I made earlier, Side and Sana are both companies that you wouldn't necessarily call fintech. When you look at them from outside, one is prop tech, one is health tech or insure
Mhm.
tech, but they operate in an ACH wire check world, and so that's why they're using Modern Treasury.
Interesting. And given the fact, Dimitri, that you're not actually touching money, does that set you up to internationalize easier? Are you focused on a global clientele?
Uh, It may. We are focused on US and Canada customers
Hmm.
today. Certainly, as we grow up scale, international becomes a bigger deal because, as you can imagine, a lot of companies are international, and so they have to have
Hmm.
support across a number of countries, and that'll be something that we think about quite a bit more in 2021. But it could potentially set us up to make it a little bit easier. I think one of the things that from a product perspective, we think of the bank as your core, um, as the core place where everything kind of starts. But actually, there's other methods by which you might be paying. So you might be using other services. You might be using, any number of online or other providers to handle international payments. So it may not be necessarily that we integrate with a bank in every country. It may be that we connect you to other services. But really, we're to some degree gonna do whatever makes the most sense for our customers and kind of follow their lead there.
This is kind of just an ancillary question, but given your knowledge of the payments industry, and I like what you said about how international companies obviously need international providers to deal with this stuff. who within the existing ecosystem is positioned well? I know Visa has done a really good job of owning different parts of different rails, essentially, so that they can play a piece in any transaction. From your vantage point, like who in the existing ecosystem is best situated, I guess, for where the market is headed?
Well, I'll just preface that with saying that my experience is very much U.S. focused. So when you think about some of the regulated industries like mortgage or healthcare that we've been closer to, those are in some ways by design very U.S. focused. So I'm not sure that I'm best placed to do that. I mean, certainly there's companies like TransferWise or Route Fusion that do a really good job of kind of abstracting some of the local payment types and local payment methods and providing individuals or businesses some ways to transact internationally. But I do think that this is one of these areas where, again, if I think about the US, credit cards are about $4 trillion in volume through credit cards. ACH, I think, did something like 56 trillion last year. So it's an order of magnitude more, and it's but it's things that like payroll or something where it's really very very domestic and very local, and in some ways even state by state.
Got it. And as you start to think about this podcast, will most likely air in between Christmas and New Year's 2020. So as you're thinking about 2021, what are your biggest priorities, biggest goals? Where would you like to see Modern Treasury in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, 2020 was quite the year. So I think 2021, I just wish that we have a more sane year, a little bit more 3D hangouts and things like that. I think where my mind goes to, first of all, is our team and being able to grow as a company. We've doubled since March in headcount. And doing that over Zoom presents challenges, both in terms of hiring and onboarding and being productive and happy as a team. So the number one thing that I'm thinking about is really how do we double again next year and maintain a strong culture and maintain sort of a good and happy place to work. But as a product matter, we'll be adding support for more banks. We'll be potentially exploring some international steps, but a lot of it is really going to be about taking the client base that we have, learning more and understanding more. What are the things that they're doing that are generalizable to a lot more amongst them and amongst new customers, and really trying to essentially build the best payment ops platform that is the default right answer for anybody who gets started with a company in any of the sectors that we covered in this podcast.
I like that. And I guess a follow-on question to what you said. So you doubled your staff during the crisis. Did you hire only locally?
We hired across the U.S. So not locally to California, but locally to the U.S.
Was that a change of plans from of your hiring strategy before the pandemic?
It was to some extent, yeah. I mean, we went, we went remote. We gave up our office in April. We decided that this was going to take a while, and so we just decided to kind of embrace it. One of the things that we've done that was super fun and hopefully tradition that lasts is back in March, April, we decided to have some events that are sort of internal that are enjoyable for everybody to be a part of. So one of the cultural traditions that we started is we call them coffee breaks, and we invite people that we just find interesting, some of our customers or investors or otherwise, to kind of come spend an hour with us. And those types of cultural traditions, I think, are actually a net benefit that we couldn't have done because it was so much harder for somebody to ask somebody to come and travel to your office and do an in-person meeting. So I think there are some things that have come out of it that are good, but we did. I think we'll continue hiring, certainly with an emphasis in California, but throughout the U.S.
Dimitri, great to talk to you, and thanks for joining us on the Tearsheet Podcast.
Thanks so much.